A frail but dignified 98-year-old black woman never expected that a simple visit to a public phone booth would spiral into a nightmare. Martha Johnson, having lived through decades of hardship, was suddenly accused by two police officers of loitering without any reasonable cause. Before she could even respond, the officers roughly cuffed her, insulted her, and dragged her across the pavement as bystanders looked on in shock. Just when it seemed like this unjust incident would fade into quiet cruelty, a remarkable intervention took place. The one to stand up for Martha was none other than the iconic Barack Obama. What happened next will astonish you. Stay with us to learn how acts of courage and compassion can reshape a moment of injustice. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Martha Johnson had weathered years of adversity, bearing witness to history's most painful chapters. She had seen the civil rights struggle unfold, lived through the painful legacies of racism, and felt the deep injustices that had marked her community for generations. At 98, she was a living embodiment of resilience, her sharp mind softened by a lifetime of experience. That evening, with a cool breeze in the air, Martha made her usual trip to the nearby phone booth. It was a modest little space, but it gave her a moment of solace, a place to hear from loved ones and connect with the world. It had been her routine for years, a small comfort in a world that had often overlooked her. But on this particular evening, fate had something different in store. As Martha reached for the phone, she noticed two officers nearby, their eyes scanning the area with a cold, calculating gaze. Though Martha had grown accustomed to suspicion, there was an unsettling tension in the air tonight. Before she could even make her call, the officers moved in, their footsteps heavy and deliberate on the pavement. "Hey, ma'am," one of the officers said abruptly, his tone demanding. "What's going on here?" Martha looked up slowly, her expression composed. "I'm just using the phone, officer," she replied, her voice gentle but unwavering. "You're hanging around here," the second officer snapped, offering no explanation. His words were pointed, filled with accusation. Martha, taken off guard, began to protest. "I'm not hanging around, officer. I'm simply standing here." Before she could finish, the first officer reached out, gripping her arm firmly and yanking her toward the patrol car. Despite her small frame, Martha possessed the resolve of someone who had endured a lifetime of struggles. She pulled against his hold, her voice faltering for a moment, but steadying quickly. "I haven't done anything wrong. Why are you treating me like this?" Neither officer responded. They slapped the cuffs on her, tightening them far more than necessary, with no explanation. The cold metal pressed painfully into her wrists, sending a shiver through her body, but it wasn't the chill that unsettled her. It was the unfairness, the prejudice she had faced for as long as she could remember, now manifesting in this moment of cruelty. Onlookers stood frozen, watching in stunned silence. No one moved to help, uncertain of what might happen next or how the situation could escalate. As they dragged her across the rough pavement, her frail body scraping against the unforgiving ground, the weight of the injustice felt suffocating. Martha's heart pounded in her chest, but her thoughts remained clear. She wasn't afraid of them. What truly frightened her was what this moment meant for the future, for the world the next generation would inherit. Just as she was about to be forced into the back of the squad car, something unexpected happened. In the distance, a sleek black limousine pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door. From inside emerged none other than Barack Obama, former president and lifelong advocate for civil rights, a symbol of hope for millions. But this wasn't a time for celebration. This was a time for action. Martha recognized the figure immediately. She had seen him speak many times, heard his words of hope and change, but this was something entirely different. Barack Obama, with his calm demeanor and unwavering principles, wasn't just a figurehead. He had always believed in standing up for the underdog, in fighting for justice, no matter the circumstances. He walked toward the scene, his expression hardening as he assessed what was happening. The police officers, startled by his sudden presence, froze for a moment. "Gentlemen," Obama's voice cut through the tension. "What is going on here?" One of the officers stammered, unsure of how to explain the situation. She was loitering, sir." Obama's eyebrows arched. "Loitering?" He turned to Martha, his gaze softening. "Is that true, ma'am?" Martha, struggling to sit up, nodded slowly. "I've been here for years, using this phone. I've never caused trouble." Obama looked at the officers again, his voice calm but firm. "You are detaining an elderly woman for using a phone booth? Is that really what you're doing?" The officers shuffled uncomfortably, suddenly realizing the weight of the situation. They had expected no one to question their authority, but now they were facing someone who commanded respect and understood the depths of injustice. One of the officers spoke up, his voice weak. "She was acting suspicious. We thought." Obama interrupted him with a hand gesture, cutting him off. "You thought? Maybe you should think a little harder before making assumptions about people, especially when they've done nothing wrong." There was a long pause. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of Obama's words. The officers were speechless. The bystanders, who had witnessed the entire ordeal, now murmured amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Obama stepped closer to Martha, offering his hand to help her stand. "Are you all right, ma'am?" She took his hand, and for the first time that night, a glimmer of hope flickered in her eyes. "I'm fine, son, just tired." "Let's get you home," Obama said softly, but his words carried the weight of someone who had seen too many wrongs go unchallenged. With the police officers standing by awkwardly, Barack Obama escorted Martha to the awaiting limousine, where he made sure she was comfortable. He gave one last glance toward the officers. "Next time you make a decision, remember that the truth matters more than suspicion." The incident outside the phone booth went viral in an instant. News outlets picked up the story, social media exploded with support for Martha, and people everywhere were talking about what had happened. But the heart of the story wasn't just about the police officers' actions. It was about the message Barack Obama had sent. This wasn't just about a public figure stepping in to help an elderly woman. It was about what that moment represented. It was about the kind of world we want to live in, a world where judgment isn't passed without reason, where everyone, no matter their age or skin color, is treated with dignity and respect. In the days that followed, the police department issued a statement. They apologized for the incident, citing a need for more training in de-escalation and understanding. Some praised them for acknowledging their mistake, while others saw it as too little, too late. Martha, on the other hand, found herself at the center of a media storm. But she didn't care about the attention. What mattered to her was the message that had been sent, that racism and prejudice would not stand, no matter how deeply embedded they were in society. Obama, meanwhile, continued his work advocating for justice, fairness, and equality. He used the incident to further his campaign for reform, making it clear that his fight for civil rights wasn't just about speeches. It was about real action, real change. In the weeks that followed, Martha's life slowly returned to normal. She had no interest in the fame that came with her story. She had lived long enough to know that fame was fleeting, but the impact of standing up for what was right could last a lifetime. Obama's gesture had sparked something in the community. People started organizing rallies and town halls to discuss racial profiling and systemic injustice. Conversations that had been whispered behind closed doors were now happening in public spaces. More importantly, the conversation was changing. Martha was invited to speak at one of the rallies, though she was hesitant at first. But when she was introduced by Obama, her heart swelled with pride. The crowd stood in awe as she shared her story, her simple but profound story of resilience, of survival, and of never giving up, even when the world seemed to be against her. "It's never too late to make a difference," Martha told the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You can stand up, no matter how old you are. You can fight for what's right, no matter how much the world tells you to stay silent." Years later, Martha's story became a symbol of hope. Barack Obama's role in standing up for her was remembered as a defining moment in his post-presidency work. The public's response had shown that even in the darkest moments, light could break through, if only people had the courage to stand up for it. Martha passed away peacefully at the age of 102, surrounded by family and friends. Her legacy lived on in the countless lives she touched and in the fight for equality that continued in her name. Obama, in his later years, often reflected on that day. It had been a moment of clarity, a reminder that true justice wasn't given to those who stood in the shadows, but to those who dared to stand in the light, to speak out, and to fight for what was right. And that, in the end, was Martha's true victory. She had shown the world that it's never too late to stand up for justice. Justice isn't a given. It's the result of perseverance, unity, and belief in what's right. Let's spread the message of truth and justice by subscribing to the channel to follow more meaningful stories. Your support is a step toward inspiring change and building a fairer world. Thank you for being with us.